discover one thing and you find something else.
Welcome to Slice of SciFi. I am Noah Richmond.
And I'm Daren Goldsvig.
Today we are discussing the Fantastic Four film legacy, talking a bit about the attempts at translating the comic book Fantastic Four, the Marvel's original family, one of the longest running series in comic book, well, probably in all of comic books.
Yeah.
And
well, for the Silver Age.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Although it really was right up until about a year ago that it was running as a regular title, going
That's
all the way
right.
back to
The 61?
yeah.
Something like, yeah. It's a long time.
Right. But anyway, so talk about, what this series that has been, has had such a long history, is such a rich history to it. It had so many talented writers and artists working on it. And yet somehow every time the live action adaptation comes onto the screen, all we've seen has been
They stink.
less than stellar. So
Yeah. And it's a bummer because I've Fantastic Four was one of my favorite books, comic books growing up, because I identified with that family element. They had, the kind of kindred spirits in a lot of ways with the relationships between Ben and Johnny Storm, so I always really kind of gravitate to that book, and I don't understand why they can't do that in a good movie,
Yeah.
It just
yeah.
boggles my mind.
Yeah, well, I guess so. Maybe we'll start very briefly with giving our thoughts about the most recent Fantastic Four film, the 2015 movie directed by Josh Trank.
Yep.
His follow-up film to Chronicle jumped from a $12 million indie film to 100. Well, originally we were heard 120 million. The latest latest estimates I've heard are 170 million dollar.
Of course, it remains to be seen on where that money was spent, because was it after because we know that there was reshoots done after
Right.
Trank had his shot at it and it was bad. At least they were saying it was from public. They did their tests on it, and so who knows? But the fact is, it doesn't show in the movie because that's awful.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's that large budget of the film, and it looks very cheap. The CGI is very poor, and
Looks like almost like our green screen.
yeah,
bad screen.
it's not a big improvement in some places.
No.
That's for sure.
Yeah, it's bad.
But the things that we have to say, I mean, first of all, for myself, I have been surprised. As bad as the reception has been to this film, I have been surprised at the sheer quantity of reviews and comments that I've come across of people saying it's mixed, that there's some good things in here, there's some things that they did right.
Wow.
But it really isn't that. It doesn't deserve to be rated as low as it's rated, and that if you see it, it's not actually the worst thing you ever saw. There's a lot of talk out there like that. I know that Peter David, the comic book writer, posted a whole post on it on his blog.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, because I'm not going to devalue their opinion of it. It certainly doesn't help when everyone is saying that it's the worst movie of all time, and then when you go watching it after hearing that, you're expecting worse, and so maybe that's why they're saying it's not as bad. I don't know, but I wanted to like it. No, let me back up. I didn't want to like it because from all the information before that, Josh Trank, the way he was treating the source material, his negligence, just to not really care about that. Dr. Doom, we read about him being this hack or whatever. So
right,
I didn't really.
Domashev.
Yeah. I wasn't a big fan of his take on it, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't have enjoyed the film if it was good.
Right.
But it's just bad. I mean, it's bad filmmaking, and that alone is how it should be looked at, not just the fact that it's a superhero movie. But the bad thing about it is I hope people don't start getting tired and this comment about it's oversaturated because of this movie, and maybe that'll dissuade people from wanting to go watch more movies in this growing genre, if you want to call it that. But it's one of those kind of movies, though, that I think will become an anchor, or at least a pinpoint as to where movies go from this point on, whether it's with Fox, or with the Fantastic Four. I really hope they get another shot with that family soon, because in the next 5 years, because I like them,
Well, I myself would not like to get another shot at them, because I would like to see the rights go back to Marvel.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, the Marvel gets the rights.
But on the other thing I would have to say is, as I said, I've been surprised at how much feedback I've seen that's either mixed or thinks it's better than people think, because I thought this was one of the most laughably bad films I'd ever seen. It's very surprising to me that anybody finds anything redeeming in it. First, they're trying to take a grim, grounded approach to the Fantastic Four, and at the same time, they're trying to make them like high school kids that are playing around with trans-teleporting matter in their science fair. So grim and grounded, and then at the same time, but you should suspend your disbelief. We're trying to make it more realistic, and you should suspend your disbelief and kind of just go with this story about these high school kids, that this is their science project, that they're going to teleport matter from one place to another. And isn't their teacher a jerk that he thinks that seems ridiculous? And by the way, they're doing this with parts from
they stole a transformer.
Right, from a car, from a junkyard, so old car parts they're going to use to teleport matter. And then while they're teleporting matter at the science fair, who should show up but a scientist that has been working on teleporting matter to another dimension, but hasn't quite solved the problem of getting the matter to teleport back. So therefore, the obvious logical thing to do is go visit the high school science fairs to find what kids might be working on this.
Well, it's because they probably bad storytelling. Yeah, it's a reach. And
the film just keeps going from there. Obviously, I'm not going to rehash the whole film, but when I hear people saying, well, it starts out actually okay, and it sort of falls apart later in the film. No, this is how it starts out. That's the premise. That's the starting point of this movie.
It certainly doesn't help you want to stay around and watch it any more than that. It's unbelievable. Yes, it's obvious that he deviates from the source material, but as I said earlier, I'm willing to go with the ride if it's done tastefully, and even though that's a ridiculous notion and way to set up a story, even if it was done right. We've seen Spielberg do some weird, stupid things like that, but if it can be done and conveyed in a way that at least entertains you, then at least you'll stay aboard on that ride. But yeah, it was bad. It was amateurish. I can't believe first of all, we can talk how bad it is, but someone gave that green light.
Yeah.
And did they give him the green light only because he did so? The Chronicle was such a great movie in its own right, so they figured, this guy's the new hot director, and they brought in Simon Kinberg, or what the writer's name. I'm probably butchering it, but anyway, he did wonders with the X-Men, and so they're probably thinking this pairing of the two would be amazing. But yeah, a bad story to begin with, and so you could start off and rip about the directing and the bad effects all you want, but the foundation of this film is this is a bad story, so it just only goes downhill from there.
Right, and you can tell that there's no chemistry with the cast. I really don't think that the actors gave it. I don't think they gave a darn about what they were there.
You can say damn. I heard that there was, I just read recently, there was tension on the set. Actual almost coming to blows between Miles Teller and Josh Trank, where they almost had to be separated from fighting. And so that just gives you an idea of what kind of tense set it must have been. I've heard comments where he was treating his crew members like crap. And that, of course, this is all secondary information, but what I do know is the movie stinks, and if you hear this stuff, it kind of makes sense why it's not a creative environment, basically.
Right. Well, and I just felt like while I was watching it, I mean, Kate Mara, just you look at her on screen and it just seems like she's sitting there like, why am I here doing this? Like,
Yeah.
I just didn't have any sense that she had any interest in playing this character, that somehow she got shoved into it, because we know she's a great actress. I mean,
Yeah.
we've seen her do very good work.
Well, the guy who played Human Torch, Michael, he did an okay job. He kind of encaptured the spirit of him, I guess. But like you had said, there was no chemistry between the actors at all.
Right.
And maybe it's because they realized this movie sucked and they just couldn't believe they were in this piece of filmmaking and
Right.
couldn't get out of it, I guess. I don't know. But it's funny though. Even on the press junkets going forward, they seemed excited about it. Even Josh Trank was engaging with some of the fans who were saying they're excited about it on Twitter, and so it looked like it was going to be something of a decent film.
Yeah,
despite all
certainly a step up. So maybe this would be a good point to start before this turns into.
right.
I guess
Big
this
rant
is
session.
before this turns into a full-blown review of the new Fantastic Four. We are trying to actually give some overview of the history of Fantastic Four films. So I guess I'll very briefly let's talk about the very first adaptations that I'm aware of, which would be 1967. There was the
cartoons.
Hanna-Barbera cartoon series. I've only seen a very little bit of that very recently, and what I have to say about it is I think it was a perfectly reasonable cartoon for its time. It's
Right.
very dated, and it's not something you wouldn't take that and make a feature film like that and have it turn into any kind of blockbuster. But on the other hand, I think it's probably not a bad adaptation of the source material of its time, presented for its time to a family audience. Does that?
No,
would you say
that's perfect. We have the benefit of looking from our own vantage point, which is with the movies, technology, cartoons, everything's great. But if you go backwards in time, you would probably, that was something of I mean, can you imagine being a kid at that time and watching these amazing, comic books coming to life? And I remember watching Spider-Man and a couple of those that you mentioned and thinking they were the best thing since sliced bread. If they can say that anymore. But I think it was really good at maintaining or at least adapting that source material, and it was an extension of the comic books. So yeah, I mean, it was good for the time, and still actually when you compare it to some of the stuff they've made,
Right.
it's better in some ways. So.
Right.
And I think that's what we want, though. As all these films, as you're going to start talking about them, but we just want something that's going to be kind of maintaining the spirit of the Fantastic Four. This family, the bond, and don't try to rewrite the damn thing. Just respect it and kind of modernize it if you must. But I just doesn't. I mean, it's all there for you. It's like you don't need to reinvent the wheel to do this. I mean, it was good from the beginning, and so I don't get it. So.
Right. So anyway, so we go from there, and there's of course been subsequent animated ones. I guess there was the 1978 Fantastic
Herbie the Robot.
3 plus robot. We'd heard stories, I guess, initially that there had been some concern about how little children were going to
Catch on fire from the Human Torch.
Right, that the Human Torch might be inspiring some kind of pyromania in children, but more recently came across news items that I consider to be maybe a little more trustworthy, saying that there was a rights issue with using the Human Torch in that particular cartoon series.
Yeah.
But-
Interesting. I like the kids will catch on fire story better.
That is a better story. I'll give
it's
you
not
that.
as boring, but
Right. And then in the 90s there was another 90s Fantastic Four cartoon that I'm aware of as well. But really the first live action one was the one that came out in 1994. Although it didn't come out, I shouldn't say. It was made in 1994.
canned but put away.
And so you have the original, how many decades would that have taken, I guess, before you finally had some sort of adaptation? Fantastic Four was early 60s?
Yeah, it was early 60s,
Okay.
61. So yeah, it was.
So it was like
3 decades.
more than 3 decades.
Yeah.
You see the first screen adaptation was made purely to hold on to the rights.
Right.
Was never intended to be shown, and yet ironically, of all the live action Fantastic Four films that have been made, it's the one that comic book fans feel best captures.
Yeah, and isn't that sad?
And it is sad because it's a terrible movie.
Well, I remember owning that on VHS. It was like a bootleg, and okay, so going back to 1994, at the time, the superhero movies that we had were limited. We had the Superman series, which kind of stopped in my mind.
Right.
It just was no good after the Superman 2.
Yeah, so I think around this time you had Quest for Peace coming out.
Oh, man, bad. And I can't really. David Hasselhoff, I think, did some.
Oh yes, the Nick Fury,
Which was
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. with David Hasselhoff.
And then Dolph Lundgren, I believe, did The Punisher. Which so you can see the temperature of the time.
Right.
Everything was really just still new, and as far as live action is concerned. And so when I was younger, I was kind of excited because there was, I believe, mention of this movie being made in some of the local publication magazines, and I just remember being kind of interested in it, and then it just kind of fell off the face of the earth. And so I think at this point it's more about the story behind it is more interesting than the actual movie itself.
Yeah.
Because it's like these actors didn't know that they thought they were making a movie that was going to be playing.
Yeah, I mean, my own experience having just seen it for the first time recently is it reminded me of the USA Up All Night films that I came across when I was I suppose probably high school age that I was seeing those. Yeah, it was really essentially that quality, and it's pretty pathetic if that's the best adaptation that you're going to find for Fantastic Four.
Isn't the Fox one though? Isn't this like they make this movie because I heard that they were going to lose the rights to it if they didn't have this movie made. And they had to have like a script approved and everything and ready to go. So they were burning the midnight oil as it was on keeping the Fantastic Four.
You're talking
franchise.
about the '94 film?
No, I'm talking about now. Fox was going to. So it's kind of similar in some ways where they made these really shitty movies.
Yeah, I mean, basically that's been the history of the Fantastic Four live action films.
Right.
I think they've all basically been made to keep the rights from expiring. I don't think any of them have been made out of any artist's vision of let's do a Fantastic Four movie.
Well, when Tim Story did those two, I don't know what the status was at the time, but there was a lot of money thrown at those two movies, and so there was lots of excitement. I know I was, but
yeah.
So, but yeah, going back on the original one you'd mentioned, sorry, but it was having again the ability to look back in time. I look at them all now, and I'd say that's probably the best of capturing the spirit of a Fantastic Four. So, which is sad, like you said, it's sad.
So could you say, as somebody who is grew up as a fan of the comic books, how does the '94 film capture the spirit better than the other ones?
Well, I mean, it's like they took the panel from panel to panel to panel from the first issue and just tried to recreate that. And so,
but it is a bad film. You would admit that as well.
Oh yeah.
So, but what does it do right?
It gets the spirit, like I said earlier, of the characters. I mean, they seem like a team. They don't seem to. I don't know. I mean, whether it's because their costumes are accurate, they kind of fight together as if they were a team. I know they tried that in the second Fantastic Four when they were fighting the Silver Surfer, but kind of that, because the Fantastic Four are always about team when they fight together, using a mixture between when Mr. Fantastic, Reed would try to stretch and contain something, and he would have, Sue Storm and try to encapsulate something in his urban visible. These things you would see combined powers going on, and that was always kind of neat about the Fantastic Four. So I haven't really got that feeling on any of the movies, and so that I got that, had that little thing going for it, but.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Uh-huh.
it's pretty sad that we were trying to find something good about that movie, about how it is right now. I mean, it's pretty sad that we're trying to say that that's the best one of all of them.
Right.
But-
Right. Yeah, as I say, you're basically watching a very low budget Roger Corman knockoff, something that I would expect to be on a double bill with Hell Comes to Frogtown.
or Chud.
And that I guess is I guess it's the best, because after that the next thing that you get is what comes out of Fox, the first big budget Fantastic Four film. The first really, I guess at that point they're deciding, well, superhero films seem to be something that audiences are turning out to see now, and we've got the rights to Fantastic Four, so they turned this thing out. Now, I really don't know much about Tim Story's background with the Fantastic Four, but having seen the film, it's hard for me to imagine he could really have been a fan of the original source material, because while it tries to capture some of those things, it just doesn't have the feel for it at all.
Well, as I had mentioned earlier about the Doctor Doom, I think they mess him up in that movie too. It's like, why can't they get Doom right? For God's sakes, they got his costume right in the '94 version.
Right. Yeah.
It's the little things like that. It's we always, as they say, we eat with our eyes first, and so when there's that kind of familiarity, and you buy into it more. So, Doctor Doom, I mean, you did the Iron Man right.
Uh-huh.
What the hell? I mean, can't you do Doctor Doom right? It's not like, and plus he's such a badass. I mean, I don't know why they want to just bring him to life and on the big screen. So
Right.
they tried it in that one and it didn't work. I mean.
So what would you? I mean, without without this turning into a whole other hour,
Right.
what would you say didn't work with the 2005 one from your point of view?
Well, the acting was horrendous. Jessica Alba was bad. The Thing costume was just horrific. I mean, there's like a scene, I believe, when he's sitting on a bridge and the bird, takes a dump on his shoulder.
Right,
And he does
right.
this. You can actually see the costume kind of like, and it's like,
You
wait,
can
he's
see
supposed to
the
be made out of
latex.
rocks,
Right.
That's bad.
Right.
So, and again, as I said, we first eat with our eyes, so you first see that, and you're just thinking, where in the, I mean, the Human Torch was good, but like, and also the scene where, Reed Richards puts his hand on the door and he tries to like open it up, and maybe it's because the effects of the time were just
Right.
limited, but it looks really bad now. It looks, and then, I mean, the sequence was fine because that's what he would have done, but it just didn't come across very well. Maybe it was a budgetary thing too, but for my takeaway is that I remember when the movie was done, I wasn't blown away, but I wasn't like pissed off like I was the most recent one. So
Right.
I was able to say, okay, well, that was a good attempt, but you still haven't got that one that we all want. And so I don't know if it's
Right.
because there's a dynamic that's a part of the Fantastic Four that just doesn't translate to the big screen. I mean, I don't know what it is. I mean, maybe their powers are all kind of difficult to reproduce. We have the Thing,
Right.
this big rock creature that, we have our own version of what he would sound like if he were talking and walking.
Right.
And then, of course, you have this flaming Human Torch, which I imagine causes quite can be difficult trying to represent that. And then, of course, you have this invisible woman with her super, when she comes and goes. And, of course, it's the stretching man, It's like, that's got to play havoc on
Right.
creating effects. But I don't even think that should be the issue. It's like there's this kind of this familiar story. It's like they were normal people like everyone, and they just happened to have bad luck and fall into this cosmic storm. And
Right. So I guess for myself, what I felt really wasn't working with that film. Well, for one thing, I think it ran into the issue that a lot of origin movies run into, which is where you wind up wondering, well, where's the story? Because it's just spending so much time introducing everything that it didn't really bother to give you an interesting story to follow. But also, it filled itself with humor that was just not funny, that was just dumb humor. And again, it didn't have any spirit to it from I've read very limited from the comics, but from what I've read, there is like there's an energy and a fun but also like a well told story quality from the stories I've read, and this just didn't feel like that at all. It felt like something that a big budget studio was just throwing out to see because they have some idea in their head of what a mainstream audience wants to see, rather than actually thinking, okay, the source material, we can trust in it, we can let it stand on its own. And that's really what I've felt about all the Fox films, is that it feels like they don't really trust their material.
Yeah, that's a good assessment. It's such a familiar story to everybody, and I don't think you have to spend a lot of time on the origin of it, and it becomes almost fatiguing to say, okay, we're going to have to sit for the next 60 minutes, and then when it finally gets to this, you're going to have your main antagonist, which is Dr. Doom and all of them. It feels like it's rushed,
Right.
because you spent the better part of the movie trying to develop these characters, and then when it finally comes into your action sequences, it's just doesn't feel like there's any soul to it. But oh man, I think with the Avengers, which was the first movie where we saw that team concept, it could happen, because I was always a little suspicious of it. But when Joss Whedon made the Avengers, he was able to bring in the humor that you were talking about, and also that teamwork concept that I was mentioning with the Fantastic Four, and he did it in a really, really fun way, and it worked. And it was amazing. So it can be done. I just, whether Fox truly gets it or they just have a bad way of identifying talent.
Right. Yeah, and that is the other thing that I have to say now with the new Fantastic Four. One of the questions is, so the old one was too much slapstick humor, really, didn't work. So now they're trying to go the other direction and be grim and grounded and gritty. And one of the questions is the failure of the 2015 Fantastic Four, is it just that you can't do grim and grounded and gritty with these characters?
Oh, I disagree. I think you can.
Yeah.
But in a way that, because the one central figure of that whole concept is Ben Grimm.
Okay.
Because he's kind of like this Frankenstein, if you think about it. You have all the guys that had their powers. He was the one that was robbed of his humanity, and so there's like this kind of this. I feel sorry for him as a character, and he's always trying to. Of all the people in the group, he wants to give his powers up, so he can become human again in the eyes of. So, and Reed Richards, of course, was always feeling guilty about that, and so that dynamic has always been, to me, kind of gloomy,
Right.
In fact, even one of Ben Grimm's girlfriends was blind in the comic books, so, which was interesting, because it's like, well, somebody who doesn't see who he is but actually knows him from within is kind of a neat concept. So it can be done. But
okay. Well, but let's play devil's advocate with, say, the entirety of the group. You've got this guy who's elastic. I mean,
Yeah.
Basically his equivalent on the DC side would be Plastic Man.
Right.
And Plastic Man's always been played for laughs.
Yes.
He's always been a comedic character. Is this an inherent weakness in Fantastic Four, that you have this elastic person? Does that make it impossible to do a true grounded, gritty version of this, or could that be pulled off, do you think, by a skilled?
I think it could be pulled off by a skilled director and writer.
Uh-huh.
Only because it's been done with. I mean, if you look at some of the Avengers, and I mean, come on, Guardians of the Galaxy had a Weiss talking raccoon with a backpack on. I mean, that's silly, and it worked.
Right.
So, but yeah, the contrast between this gentleman, or this guy who can stretch Armstrong, and it seems wacky and displaced with the other characters in some ways. And so yeah, I do think it would be a challenge, and it is a challenge, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, the film that you're hearing people say did it right for the Fantastic Four is The Incredibles.
Right.
You know, that's the one where you're hearing people say, well, that one did it right.
Right.
But that was not a grim, gritty, serious film. You know, that was very humor-filled movie.
Well, of course, because it's designed for kids, but there were times that were, what they would say, teachable moments for kids, but could be considered grim. But that's what you always have with an antagonist anyway, so at least it's how we are drawn to it. The other hero comes and saves the day, so that type of thing. So,
Right.
if you've read the comic books of Fantastic Four, there's always been this infighting going on, and it's Johnny gets pissed off at Ben Grimm, and they always fight. So that struggle has always been real, and that's why it's going to be like a family. So there's a certain darkness to that the whole time, and it's just a combination of that. And
Right.
I don't even know that it'll ever be done right.
So I guess another question I have in terms of doing it right, what about Fantastic Four, the Fantastic Four 2, The Rise of the Silver Surfer?
Yeah.
Did you think they did the Silver Surfer right?
Yeah, I did like their adaptation of Silver Surfer. I didn't like the way he kind of dissolved into his
Right.
surfboard and everything, but I thought they did a great job. I thought they did an amazing job with Lawrence Fishburne being selected for the voice, and I don't know the actor's name, who was wearing the green screen suit, but was thin and slender, like
Right.
you would imagine. But I do think they did a good job with that, or Tim Story did with this movie, and it's just too many other things about that movie were bad as well. So, but
Yeah.
the one nice thing about it is that there was no origin involved.
Right.
But we still had that struggle with Reed trying to cure Ben, and that kind of was always in the forefront.
Right.
And that's actually been interwoven with a lot of the stories with the Fantastic Four all these years anyway. So,
Yeah, I would certainly say, as poor of a film as that was, and all of these, none of these have been remotely good films. I did think that was the best one, just in that it had some elements
yeah.
that it starts out and you're seeing this planet that's being destroyed. The Silver Surfer really does capture a certain quality of this doomed, entrapped slave of Galactus. And okay, it's a little odd to me that they make Galactus into this rain cloud instead of actually the what you see in the comic. That doesn't work for me. But at least it conveys some sense of this omnipresent. You see this cloud enveloping Earth, and you do have some feeling.
Right.
There is this omnipresent danger. So at least that one gets that much right.
Yeah, no, I actually, it as much as we say that the '94 version has the best spirit going for it, but I remember leaving the theater after the second story, Tim Story movie, thinking it wasn't all that bad, and actually having hope that maybe the next movie could be a Silver Surfer movie or something. But I just, unfortunately, the ending with the Galactus big smoke cloud left a bad taste in my mouth. But for the most part, the sequences were pretty good. There was some cool action sequences in that movie. That relationship that was developed between Sue and I can't remember his name, the Silver Surfer.
Right. Right.
I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But it just seemed to be sincere, and it was like this kind of reminded of the woman he had left on his planet after Galactus, gave him the opportunity to either be his herald or. So that was kind of neat how they had that story between Sue and Silver Surfer. So yeah, I mean there were things about it I liked, but if I had to give it a review, I would probably have said it was just.
Yeah, 2-star movie.
I wouldn't go that low. I would say probably a 4 or 5 out of 10.
Oh, out of 10. Yeah.
Well, but out of 5, I'd say 2 is probably appropriate.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I mean because the character interactions are still, the chemistry just isn't that great.
Yeah.
The story isn't very well told, and the.
Boy, I bet you Chris Evans is happy as heck that he got out of that franchise.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I'm glad he did too. And although I do think he did a great job as the Human Torch, I think he did. But in fact, of all the
yeah, he definitely carried the role the way you would envision it. Yeah.
But he's obviously he's better as Captain America. So.
Right. Anyway, I think that's a fairly broad overview. Is there any other general observations you wanted to throw out? Thoughts about Fantastic Four,
Yeah.
the legacy of the live action adaptations?
Well, why not just, how about this? Everyone, the popular opinion is to let Fox lose the rights and go back to Marvel.
Yeah.
But we've seen Marvel, or I'm sorry, Fox can do a franchise decent with the X-Men.
Right.
And although some would argue that too, but I've actually thought they've done a really good job the last couple movies.
Right.
I don't know, maybe it's better to maybe do a live, like a animated Fantastic Four. Take a shot at that. And get something good in people's minds now, and
Yeah, just show how it's done right.
yeah, because I think there's too many events that have happened in the Marvel universe that you couldn't just throw the Fantastic Four back into it now.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you've already gone in the space aspects of it, so you're not including Galactus, who unfortunately is a very integral part to the Infinity Gauntlet story. So.
Right.
I think that unfortunately we're going to lose that part. So you just can't throw them into that story that's being developed anyway without.
Yeah, well, I guess it's a question who would have the rights to make an animated Fantastic Four movie.
And if Fox did, I would.
Yeah.
They would at least.
But
be
you're
sincere
right. I
about it.
actually think that that's a really interesting point. That might be the best way forward at the moment.
Yeah, I mean it would be cheaper. Not actually necessarily depending on how they made it, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean DC has done an amazing job with some of their
Yeah.
their cartoons,
Yeah.
and recently. So
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is, but it certainly hasn't.
Yeah. Certainly hasn't shown up on the screen yet. Certainly, especially with the recent live action films, and particularly with the recent Josh Trank one.
God, I have not seen a movie that bad since Pixels. No.
Yeah.
But it's a bad movie. It was appalling, and you were laughing the whole damn time at the end.
I had tears coming out of my eyes. I was laughing at that film.
Yeah, and I was too upset to laugh. I was almost sad and upset, thinking, I can't believe this dickhead. Sorry, but was allowed to take it this far. Josh Trank, you're a jackass. I'm sorry, because he is. I mean, you saw the, and then the tweet that came out about him that. This was unfortunately the movie we'll never have seen, or his movie would have been well reviewed or something. Well, if it was that good, it would not have got to this point.
Uh-huh.
I mean, if this, when they brought his version to screeners, the screening audiences, they said it needed more action, and it apparently didn't have any. And I'm not saying you need to have action to be a good movie, obviously not, but this is the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
So
if there was anything good, then none of it made into the final cut, because that was a film that was just poor from start to finish.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I'm more interested in the story behind the making of it. That's almost going to be a compelling documentary.
Yeah, that should be interesting.
But it's a damn shame because, like I said earlier, they're one of my favorite comic books with growing up, and I still can't believe they haven't done it right. Come on, guys.
So that is our overview of Fantastic Four, the film legacy. And thank you for watching Slice of Sci-Fi.
Don't watch it.
Don't watch Fantastic Four.
No. And you can catch the 94 on YouTube, I think.
Yeah, 94. So, you can watch the 67 cartoons.
Yeah, scrub through it. Yeah, scrub through it a little bit, but just understand it's not that good of a movie either. So, until next time.
See ya.
Bye.